Young people now are growing up where their futures are basically being threatened the whole time. It's very unnerving.
A private room, a royal demand, and a silence that cracked the crown from within. When Prince Harry insisted Meghan wear a specific tiara, the Queen didn't just say no. She delivered a warning that stunned everyone in the room. Prince William was there, and for the first time, he's revealing what really happened that day. Not the version polished for cameras, but the version whispered behind closed doors. Why did this single moment nearly fracture the monarchy itself? And what secret did the Queen take to her grave? The perfect storm brewing. May 2018. The gates of Buckingham Palace gleamed under the spring sun, and from the outside, it all looked like a fairy tale in motion. Meghan Markle, the glamorous American actress who had captured Prince Harry's heart, was just days away from becoming a duchess. The world watched with breathless anticipation, dazzled by the gowns, the carriages, the promise of modern royalty. But behind those gilded walls, something far more fragile than tulle and tiaras was unfolding. Meghan wasn't just marrying a prince. She was stepping into a centuries-old institution where love, tradition, and power often sit at odds. The monarchy is not a family in the way most people understand it. It is a fortress of rituals, rules, and shadows. And from the moment Meghan said yes, every glance, every gesture, every whisper will be measured against 1,000 years of royal expectation. To her, the wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a chance to bring together her past and her future, to honor both where she came from and where she was going. She longed for grace, for symbolism, for a day that would feel truly hers. But the palace had other ideas. It began with the tiara, a sparkling symbol that, in royal tradition, is more than just an accessory. It is a quiet coronation of sorts, an offering from the Queen herself, a gesture that says, "You are one of us now." Kate had worn the elegant Cartier halo. Princess Beatrice would later choose Queen Mary's bold fringed tiara. Each bride before her had found a piece of history to carry into the future. For Meghan, the moment should have been magical. Instead, it turned cold. The tiara she wanted, delicate, rare, glistening with whispers of the past, was met with hesitation. Not because of its beauty, but because of its story. A story that had been buried under decades of royal silence. What no one had told Meghan, what no one could tell her outright, was that some jewels sparkled not with diamonds, but with scandal. And the one she had chosen? It carried secrets darker than she could have imagined. What happened next would not only ignite tension within the palace, it would mark the first crack in what the public believed was a perfect royal union. Because when it comes to the crown, nothing, not even a bride's dream, is ever truly hers to keep. The forbidden emerald. The meeting took place not in a grand ballroom or formal stateroom, but somewhere far more sacred. Queen Elizabeth's private dressing room inside Buckingham Palace. A space so rarely entered by outsiders that even Harry would later call it extraordinary. But it wasn't just a room that left an impression. It was what happened inside those quiet, velvet-lined walls that changed everything. The Queen, calm and composed as ever, was not alone. At her side stood Angela Kelly, her most trusted aide, keeper of royal garments, and guardian of the Queen's unspoken intentions. Together, they presented Meghan with 5 tiaras, each resting in its own velvet case like a relic from a forgotten time. These weren't just accessories. They were heirlooms steeped in legacy, power, and whispers of history, each one dazzling, each one priceless. But only one made Meghan catch her breath. The Greville Emerald Kokoschnik. Its beauty was undeniable. $13 million worth of diamonds and emeralds, crowned by a hauntingly deep 93.7-carat emerald at its center. Crafted in 1919 by the legendary House of Boucheron, it shimmered with the clean elegance of Art Deco design and a kind of rare, untouchable glamour. This was not just a tiara. It was a moment, a statement, a piece that seemed, as Harry later said, made for Meg. Meghan's eyes lit up. She could see it already. The vivid green stone echoing the subtle hues of her gown, the vintage silhouette complementing her modern taste. It was bold, it was unforgettable, and it was perfect for a woman rewriting what it meant to marry into royalty. But then came a pause, a shift in the air, and a single word that landed like a stone. No. The Queen's voice was gentle but firm. Not cruel, Not emotional, simply absolute. The tiara, she explained, had Russian origins. And in royal language, that doesn't just mean geography. It means controversy. It means secrets. It means danger. The truth? This tiara may have entered British hands through what historian Robert Lacey delicately calls undefined, not to say dodgy channels. Its arrival dates back to the violent collapse of the Russian Empire, 1918, when Tsar Nicholas II, the Queen's own cousin, was executed alongside his entire family. In the bloody aftermath, a flood of royal treasures, necklaces, crowns, rings, spilled into Europe's black markets. Quiet deals were struck. Names were never mentioned. Provenance blurred into myth. And this tiara? It may have once adorned the head of a murdered Russian princess. The Queen understood the weight of that. She knew that placing this tiara on Meghan's head wouldn't just dazzle the world. It would raise ghosts. Headlines would question its origins. Commentators would speculate on royal complicity. And what should have been a celebration of love might instead become a grim reflection on revolution, exile, and bloodlines lost. But Harry didn't see any of that. He saw the woman he loved being denied something that had lit up her face. He heard another door closing, another cold shoulder, another no in a palace that seemed built on silence and rules. And that was the moment of tension, so carefully hidden, began to boil over. Because for Harry, this wasn't about emeralds or etiquette. It was about protecting the one person who made him feel free. And he couldn't understand why no one else seemed willing to do the same. The real enemy emerges. If you want to understand what really happened in the quiet chaos before the royal wedding, you have to understand one woman, Angela Kelly. She wasn't a royal. She wasn't titled. But inside the palace, she held a kind of power that could make even a prince feel small. To the public, she was the Queen's loyal dresser. Behind the scenes, she was far more than that. Angela Kelly began her journey in 1994, quietly managing hemlines and hat boxes. But over nearly 3 decades, she rose to become one of the most influential figures in the Queen's inner circle. Her full title? Personal assistant, advisor, and curator to Her Majesty the Queen for jewelry, insignias, and wardrobe. But those who knew better simply called her the gatekeeper. She wasn't just picking out pearls and brooches. She was protecting a kingdom of secrets, one velvet box at a time. Deep beneath Buckingham Palace sits a long, sealed chamber, the Royal Jewelry Vault. Over 150 feet of treasure. And every tiara, every jewel, every whispered legacy was under Kelly's control. She alone decided what emerged into the light, and what stayed locked in the dark. And according to Harry, she held all the cards. After the Queen gently steered Meghan away from the forbidden emerald tiara and offered the Queen Mary diamond bandeau instead. Still beautiful, still historic. It should have been a graceful handover. The Queen even gave a simple piece of practical advice. Make sure you practice putting it on with your hairdresser. It's tricky, and you don't want to be doing it for the first time on the day. It was a moment meant to ease the nerves. But instead, it sparked a silent war. When Meghan's team tried to contact Kelly to arrange a hair trial, they were met with something unexpected. Silence. Total, deliberate silence. Angela didn't respond to any of our messages. Harry would later write, "We kept trying. No response." Days passed. Nothing. And when they finally did reach her, what came next felt less like royal protocol and more like punishment. Kelly insisted the tiara could only leave the palace under strict conditions: an official royal orderly, a full police escort. It felt excessive, almost theatrical, but with the wedding looming, they agreed to whatever hoops she laid out, no matter how unnecessary. But beneath the surface, something else was at play. This wasn't about security. This was about control. Angela Kelly was sending a message, not just to Meghan, but to Harry, a quiet, unwavering reminder that even a prince doesn't get to bypass palace hierarchy. Not when he's treading in her domain. What followed was a slow, suffocating descent into red tape. Every request was met with resistance. Every step forward came a new delay, a new rule, a new excuse. Meghan, caught in the middle, was left feeling anxious, unwelcomed, and increasingly isolated. And Harry? He watched it unfold like a slow-motion collapse. He had promised to protect her, to shield her, and yet, inside his own family's fortress, he couldn't even get a tiara for her hair trial. It was the smallest of things, but in that moment, it felt like everything, and the cracks, once hairline, were beginning to widen. Because if the palace could make even the simplest moment feel like a battlefield, what would come next? Brothers' divide begins. While the tiara drama unfolds behind closed doors, another set of eyes is watching, quiet, concerned, and increasingly unsettled. Prince William stands at a distance, observing the storm brew around his younger brother. What troubles him isn't the headlines or the jewelry. It's Harry himself, the brother he once laughed in the back seats of Land Rovers, the boy who once made the world smile with his mischief, now looks different. Royal biographer Robert Jobson would later reveal that both William and King Charles noticed it. Harry, once lighthearted and grounded, now seemed permanently on edge. And William couldn't shake the feeling that something fragile was beginning to fracture. For William, this wasn't just about wedding stress. It was about watching someone you love drift into a place you can't follow. They had survived so much together. Diana's death, the long shadow of grief, the suffocating expectations of royalty. And yet, through it all, they had leaned on each other like twin pillars holding up the same crown. But now, Harry was slipping, resisting, fighting everything that once bound them. And William faced an impossible truth. He loved his brother, but he also understood the monarchy in a way Harry didn't. William had already surrendered to the quiet reality that being royal means sacrifice. It means duty above desire. It means letting go of certain dreams so the institution can survive. When he married Kate, they didn't rebel. They adapted. They learned to dance within the confines of tradition, not break free from it. But Harry was tearing at the walls. The breaking point came one evening in the quiet halls of Kensington Palace. Just the two of them. No staff, no cameras, just brothers. William tried to explain about the Queen, the symbolism of the tiara, the delicate balance between personal choice and public meaning. He spoke calmly, logically, with the weight of centuries in his voice. But Harry wasn't listening. He was already burning with frustration. Why can't she just wear what she wants? He snapped. It's her wedding day. To Harry, it wasn't about history. It was about how Meghan was being treated. Pushed aside, second-guessed, denied. And in that moment, all of William's carefully measured words felt like excuses. Like a family choosing protocol over love. Cold tradition over compassion. The conversation spiraled. Harry accused William of being blind to what was happening. William, in turn, feared Harry was losing perspective, blinded by emotion, deaf to the deeper stakes. What neither of them could admit out loud was the truth hovering between them. Their bond, once unbreakable, was starting to crack. And then, quietly, solemnly, the Queen summoned William. It wasn't formal. No briefing. No statement. Just tea. These meetings were rare and always meant something deeper. Over porcelain cups in silence laced with meaning, the Queen shared her worries. Not just about the wedding, but about the family, about the future, about Harry. She didn't speak in judgment. She spoke like a grandmother who had watched too many storms form over too many generations. She told William that things might change faster than they expected, that the institution might be tested in ways it hadn't been in decades. And most of all, she told him prepare for a future where his loyalty might be split between his brother and the crown. William left that meeting with a weight no one could see, a quiet burden that pressed heavier with every passing day. He now understood something he hadn't wanted to believe. His brother might be slipping away, and there might be no way to bring him back. The final confrontation came just days before the wedding. Meghan's French hairdresser had already arrived in London. The clock was ticking and tensions were high. And then, out of nowhere, Angela Kelly appeared, like a shadow stepping into light. She arrived at Kensington Palace unannounced, carrying the tiara and something Harry hadn't expected, a release form. The meeting took place in the audience room, a formal, almost ceremonial space used for official matters. But this wasn't about statecraft. This was about control. Angela Kelly placed a document on the table. with the weight of a final decree. No words, no warmth, just paper and power. Harry, weary from weeks of unanswered calls and silent resistance, signed it. Only then, after his signature was neatly inked, did she finally hand over the tiara. Harry felt a wave of relief. The moment should have marked the end of it all. The stress, the tension, the endless stonewalling. He even tried to lighten the air. "Thank you," he said. Then, with a small smile, he added, "Though it would have made our lives so much easier to have had it sooner." But the moment didn't soften. It snapped. Kelly's face changed. Her composure shattered. And suddenly, her eyes flared with what Harry would later call fire. She lashed out, sharp, biting, unapologetic. All the politeness peeled away, revealing the anger just beneath her carefully managed surface. Harry, stunned and exhausted, tried to hold the line. "Angela, you really want to do this now? Really? Now?" But she didn't back down. She stared at him, calm, cold, deliberate, with a look he'd never forget. It wasn't just defiance. It was something darker, a silent warning, a message passed not in words, but in a glance that made him shiver. This isn't over. And she was right. 6 months later, in November 2018, the warning became a prophecy. The Sun newspaper broke the story that would haunt them for years. They called it Tiaragate. The article was brutal. It painted Harry as spoiled and enraged, claiming he had hit the roof when Meghan was denied the emerald tiara. Worse, it quoted the Queen herself, saying, "Meghan cannot have whatever she wants." It wasn't just embarrassing. It was humiliating. But what hurt most wasn't the headlines. It was the silence. The palace refused to comment. True to tradition. No denial. No correction. Just cold, deliberate stillness. And that silence told Harry and Meghan everything they needed to know. If throwing them under the bus helped protect the institution, the palace wouldn't hesitate. This betrayal came at the worst possible time. The couple had just returned from a triumphant tour of the South Pacific. Meghan was glowing, newly pregnant with their first child. They should have been celebrating. Instead, they were watching their reputations be quietly dismantled by the very institution they were trying to serve. And somewhere in the background, behind the headlines and briefings, was a single look from a single woman, still echoing in Harry's memory. This isn't over. And it wasn't. The ripple effect. Looking back, it's clear now this was the first domino. At the time, it didn't feel historic. It just felt cruel. Another humiliation. Another quiet sting in a series that Meghan was being forced to endure. But it was this moment, the tiara, the silence, the glare, that began the slow unraveling of everything that came next. What should have been a footnote in royal wedding prep became a blueprint, a pattern that repeated itself again and again. Meghan would be cast as difficult, demanding, a disruptive outsider who didn't understand how things are done. Harry, once beloved for his openness and warmth, was suddenly portrayed as reckless, blinded by love, manipulated, or worse, lost. And the palace? Always silent. That silence wasn't neutral. It was strategic. It allowed the narrative to harden in the public imagination like wet cement. No matter how far from the truth it drifted, no voice came from behind the gates to set the record straight. For Meghan, it was like watching herself disappear, one headline at a time. She had entered this world with genuine hope. She wasn't trying to break the monarchy. She wanted to modernize it, contribute something meaningful. Instead, she found herself constantly defending her every move, her every word, her very character. And for Harry, it was devastating. He had seen this script before. He had lived through the palace's silence as it swallowed his mother. He had watched Diana cry alone, watched her plead for support that never came, watched her be fed to the press in exchange for protecting the firm. And now it was happening again to the woman he loved most. He couldn't bear it. The tension with William, once just cracks beneath the surface, deepened into something colder, more permanent. William believed in the system. He believed in tradition, in protocols that had carried their family through centuries of scandal and sacrifice. To him, stability was a mission, and deviation was dangerous. But Harry believed in love, in truth, in protecting Meghan, even if it meant breaking the code. They no longer spoke the same language, and no one seemed willing to bridge the divide. Years later, the pain still echoes in the small things. During a recent public engagement, William casually remarked that family can be a mixed bag, a harmless phrase to most ears, but to those watching closely, it felt like a glimpse beneath the armor, a rare, royal admission that not all wounds stay hidden behind palace walls. And then there was the Queen. She had watched it all unfold with a measured gaze, the growing hostility, the breakdown between her grandsons, the whispers behind closed doors. And before her death, she made a quiet but final move. Angela Kelly, once to keep her the Queen's jewels in secret, was asked to sign what royal biographer Valentine Lowe called an enhanced confidentiality agreement. After Elizabeth's passing, Kelly was quietly relocated from her grace and favor home at Windsor to a remote house in the Peak District. It was over. No more stories. No more behind-the-scenes revelations. The last guardian of that chapter had been officially silenced, but it didn't matter, because by then, the damage was done. And somewhere between a missing tiara and a brother's broken trust, the royal family had already begun to lose something far more precious than emeralds. They were losing each other, the price of a tiara. Here's the truth about the tiara controversy that most people miss. It was never really about the jewelry. It was about something far more human: respect, acceptance, and the quiet but piercing question that lingered behind every royal smile. Would Meghan ever truly be welcomed into this family? When the Queen declined Meghan's request to wear the emerald Greville Kokoshnik tiara, the reasoning, on paper, made sense. The tiara's murky ties to post-revolutionary Russia could have ignited a media firestorm. It wasn't about denying beauty. It was about avoiding headlines. But the decision itself wasn't the wound. It was the way it was carried out. The silence, the stonewalling, the endless delays, the bureaucratic hoops, the subtle, strategic power plays that turn a simple hair trial into a battlefield. That told Meghan everything she needed to know. It told her that her preferences didn't matter, that her voice didn't carry weight in these halls, that fitting in meant falling in line. It told Harry that his wife's happiness was negotiable, so long as the palace machine kept running smoothly. And worst of all, it created a chilling precedent. It empowered palace staff to make things difficult, to erect quiet barriers, to remind the couple again and again who really held the reins. But perhaps the cruelest twist came 6 months later, when Princess Eugenie walked down the aisle wearing that very same tiara. No warnings about Russian origins, no whispers of historical baggage, no last-minute refusals or release forms, just admiration, approval, and silence. The message couldn't have been louder. Some people are allowed to wear the past, no matter how complicated. Some brides are trusted with legacy, and others are not. And for Harry, watching that tiara sparkle on Eugenie's head must have felt like a slow, burning betrayal. It wasn't just about the jewel. It was about what it confirmed: that Meghan would always be treated differently, that what was denied to her wasn't for reasons of tradition, but of preference, palace preference, that the line between acceptance and exclusion wasn't drawn by protocol, but by people. Yes, the Queen Mary diamond bandeau tiara that Meghan wore was breathtaking, elegant, historic, fit for a duchess, but it wasn't her choice. It was what she was given. And that distinction between what a royal bride chooses and what she's allowed carries a weight that only those behind palace walls truly understand. For Meghan, it marked the beginning of a slow erasure. And for Harry, it confirmed a heartbreaking truth. In the House of Windsor, love may be grand, but power still chooses what you wear. The crown that broke the crown. Looking back now, it almost feels unthinkable that something as seemingly trivial as a tiara could ignite a chain of events that would reshape the royal family forever. But that's the thing about symbols. They're never just objects. They carry weight, emotional weight. And that emerald tiara, it came to represent everything that was already cracked beneath the polished surface. It represented a royal family that smiled in public, while quietly making Meghan feel like a stranger behind palace walls. A system that spoke of inclusion and modernity, yet clung to rigid tradition when it mattered most. And more than anything, it symbolized Harry's quiet heartbreak, the growing realization that in this world he would be forced to choose his wife or his family. And that's the true tragedy, because it didn't have to end this way. With a little compassion, with a clearer explanation, with a moment of grace instead of bureaucracy, this could have been avoided. Meghan could have understood the sensitivity behind the tiara's history. They could have chosen another piece together, something beautiful, something symbolic of unity instead of division. Instead, what they got was silence, resistance, coldness masked as protocol. It was never one catastrophic event. It was a slow burn of disrespect, death by 1,000 small cuts. No single slight was unforgivable. But when added together, the message became impossible to ignore. You do not belong. Now, Harry and Meghan live oceans away in California, financially independent, raising their children with freedom, and finally able to speak without fear of palace reprisal. But the cost of that freedom was enormous, not just for them, but for everyone. The Queen, in her final years, watched the family she had given everything to slowly fracture along lines of silence and missed opportunities. William now walks a path shaped by duty, but shadowed by a brother who may never fully return. And the British people lost two voices who could have carried the monarchy into a new era of relevance, service, and empathy, all because of a tiara. Not the stone, not the design, but the meaning behind it. And the saddest part? It didn't start with hostility. It started with kindness. In his memoir, Harry writes of a tender moment during the tiara selection. The Queen looked at Meghan, smiled, and said softly, "Tiaras suit you." Meghan, surprised and moved, replied, "Thank you, ma'am." That was a relationship that could have blossomed, one of warmth, mutual respect, and shared legacy. That was the bridge that could have been built. Instead, it was burned down by pride, pettiness, and the cold machinery of the crown. Because sometimes it's the smallest gestures that carry the heaviest consequences. Sometimes a single emerald, no matter how beautiful, can reveal fractures that were there all along. And sometimes the most dazzling tiaras in the world simply aren't worth the price of a broken family. What do you think? Was the Queen right to deny Meghan the emerald tiara? Could better communication have changed everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if you found this royal deep dive as emotional and eye-opening as I did, please give a like and subscribe for more untold stories from behind palace walls. Because trust me, this is only the beginning. Until next time, keep questioning what you think you know about the royals.